They said he was just Lily's grandpa, a tired old man with a cap and a cane, not a real guest speaker. That's what the teacher whispered as she rolled her eyes, scribbling something sarcastic on the whiteboard while he stood quietly at the front of the classroom, waiting for her to stop laughing. He didn't interrupt her. Didn't remind anyone of who he was or what he'd done. Just held the edge of a worn folder in both hands like it weighed more than it should have, and sighed. A few faded photographs, 3 military commendations, and 1 letter, hand-signed by a general whose name would silence the room 8 minutes later. And when the video finally surfaced, and the school board paused their live broadcast mid-sentence, it wasn't just a guest speaker they realized they'd dismissed, it was a legacy. If you believe veterans deserve more than mockery, and that our kids deserve to learn what real service looks like, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who still remembers what honor means. Harold Mac McClellan didn't walk into that middle school looking for validation. He walked in because Lily, his 12-year-old granddaughter, had begged him to speak during career week. It took some convincing. His voice didn't carry like it used to, and his knees had long since traded combat boots for orthopedic braces. But Lily had that look, just like her mother used to, when she really wanted something. So he said yes, picked out his nicest shirt, pressed his khakis 3 times, and pulled his old folder from the bottom drawer of his desk, the one with the Marine Corps emblem stamped faintly into the corner. His VA-issued jacket was snug around the shoulders, his cap faded and threadbare. But he stood tall the moment he crossed the school's threshold. The secretary barely looked up from her phone when he checked in. A security guard waved him through like he was someone's confused grandpa who wandered in. And by the time he reached room 214, Ms. Dana Collins was already deep into some joke about how the next speaker might put you to sleep, but at least he'll get a nap. A few students laughed. Mac heard it, didn't flinch. He just nodded toward Lily, who sat up straighter in her seat, as beaming with pride, and stepped forward with the kind of quiet reverence that doesn't ask for attention, only deserves it. He introduced himself with the same steady cadence he once used giving mission briefs, but now his voice cracked in places not from nerves, but from time. "My name is Harold McClellan," he began. "I served in the 1st Marine Division, and I've got a few things I'd like to share." Miss Collins yawned loudly. "Let's keep it under 10 minutes, okay? The kids get restless." Mac nodded politely. Behind him, one boy snorted. Another mimicked a cane tap with his pen. Still, he opened the folder. Inside, 3 medals, 1 for valor, 1 for survival, 1 for something he'd never spoken about, and a letter dated 1973, written in black ink and signed by Lieutenant General Malcolm Raines, commending Mac for saving 5 men in an off-the-record jungle op no textbook ever mentioned. He didn't read the letter aloud, didn't flash the medals, just told a story about what it meant to lead, what it meant to come home, about watching friends go silent beside you and still waking up to write their names down so no one would forget. But Ms. Collins chuckled. "All right, Grandpa Glory Days, let's wrap it up, unless you've got war souvenirs to pass around." Mac looked at her for a moment. Not angry, not embarrassed, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from watching the world laugh at what you bled for. He closed the folder, thanked the students, and walked out without a word. Lily followed him into the hallway, eyes wide. "You were amazing," she whispered. "Ignore her. She doesn't get it." Mac smiled faintly. "She will," he said. And 8 minutes later, she did. Because one of the students had filmed everything. The sarcasm, the yawns, the disrespect, and the quiet grace of a man who never once asked for applause. That clip hit the school's parent group chat before Mac made it to the parking lot. By the time he started his car, it had 700 shares. A school board member's daughter was in that class. She showed it to her father mid-meeting, live, on air. And just like that, they paused the broadcast. Miss Collins was paged to the boardroom. She still didn't know. Still smirking. Still unaware that a silent man in a VA jacket had just pulled the weight of an entire institution into focus without saying a word. 8 minutes doesn't seem like much. Not enough time to change someone's mind, let alone their future. But when truth is moving, 8 minutes can split history into a before and after. By the time Harold McClellan had reached the school's front exit and paused beneath the flagpole to rest, the video was already spreading like spilled ink, quiet at first, but impossible to clean up. He stood under that flag not for show, but out of habit. Back straight, shoulders square, eyes soft but alert, watching the parking lot like he used to watch jumble edges. He wasn't crying, wasn't angry. He just looked like a man who'd hoped for better from a world he protected. Lily stayed by his side the whole time, holding his arm, telling him it was okay, that she was proud, that Miss Collins was just mean sometimes. But Mac wasn't thinking about her. He was thinking about how it wasn't new, how this wasn't the first classroom, the first crowd, the first laugh, just the most recent. But then the principal's door slammed open, and everything changed. Because somewhere down the hallway, Miss Collins was being pulled out of a staff meeting, phone vibrating nonstop in her pocket, face pale from the glare of 5 open tabs on a school board member's laptop, all showing the same thing. Her voice, her smirk, and Mac's silence. The clip had crossed 1,000 shares before the building bell even rang. A local journalist, who happened to be on the PDA, posted it with the caption, "This is how our schools treat veterans?" A veterans advocacy group reposted it within minutes. The comments weren't just angry, they were unified. He never even raised his voice. My grandfather would have walked out too. She mocked a Marine. On camera. Meanwhile, Mac sat quietly on the bench near the visitor's lot. The sun caught the outline of his medals through the folder, and he watched the school building like it was a structure made of paper. Not angry, just waiting. Inside, the school board had halted their live meeting, unprecedented, and replaced the digital slide presentation with the clip. They let it play in full. No editing, no narration, just reality, raw and uncomfortable. A few board members shifted in their seats. One clenched his pen until it cracked. The president, Colonel David Brenner, retired Air Force, took a slow breath, folded his hands, and said only 4 words. "Where is the teacher?" Miss Collins entered the boardroom moments later, still adjusting her lanyard, the smile not yet gone from her face. She assumed this was about scheduling. Maybe someone wanted her opinion on another assembly. She never noticed the camera in the corner, the live stream still rolling, or the silence so sharp you could feel it in your teeth. "Miss Collins," Colonel Brenner began, his voice low but tight. "Do you recognize the man in this video?" She glanced at the paused frame, Mac mid-sentence, folder open, her own face in the corner yawning like a bored teenager, and she blinked. "Yeah, that was career week," she said with a shrug. "Lily's grandpa." He rambled a bit, but the board president raised a hand. The clip resumed. 8 minutes. 8 uninterrupted minutes of contrast, of dignity and mockery, of experience dismissed by sarcasm, of a man standing with more strength in his silence than anyone else had with their words. By the time it ended, the air felt thick. Colin's mouth hung open slightly, but her eyes weren't confused anymore. Just afraid. "You didn't verify his background?" a board member asked. "No," she replied, quieter now. "He was just Lily's grandpa." "He is Harold McClellan," Brenner said, tapping the folder now placed on the table. "Platoon Sergeant, 1st Marine Division. Bronze Star with V for Valor. 2 tours in Vietnam. Wounded in Khe Sanh. Served in operations so sensitive his DD 214 is partially redacted." "That's who you laughed at." Silence fell again. "I didn't know," she said, voice cracking. "That's exactly the problem," Brenner replied. "And now the entire city does." In the livestream chat, viewers were flooding the feed with American flags, angry emojis, and messages like "Suspend her now," "Make it right," and "Thank you, Mac." The superintendent, usually a man who avoided controversy like a fire, stood and read a prepared statement, likely printed in the 8 minutes since the clip first hit. Effective immediately, Miss Collins is suspended pending further review. This board does not tolerate disrespect toward guests, especially those who have sacrificed in service to this country. He paused, then added, and the veteran in question is invited to return. This time, to be honored properly. Collins didn't speak. She left the room stiffly, face white as printer paper. She passed through the hallway unnoticed by staff who were now whispering about what happened. Phones buzzed. Emails pinged. And one quiet 8th grader named Jonah walked past her and simply said, "You messed with the wrong Marine." Outside, Mac didn't know what was happening inside yet. He just sat quietly, not asking for validation, not aware the world was shifting. Lily checked her phone and gasped. "Grandpa, it's everywhere. You're everywhere." He squinted. "Is that good?" She nodded, eyes wide. "Really good." A reporter arrived. Then another. Then a third. Mac tried to wave them off. "I didn't do anything," he said. "Just told a story." But that was the point. He had done everything by doing nothing ugly. And when the principal came rushing out, flanked by 2 school board members and holding a printout of Mac's service record, she didn't speak with condescension anymore. She asked, quietly, "Would you come back in, sir? We owe you an apology." Mac looked at Lily. "You coming with me?" "Always," she smiled. And together they stood up, walked past the flagpole, and stepped back into a building that, 8 minutes ago, thought he was just a man with a cap and a story. Now, they were ready to listen. The walk back into the school wasn't long, but it felt different now. Not because Harold Mac McClellan had changed, but because the air around him had. The students in the halls paused mid-step. Teachers turned, lips parted. Even the janitor stood upright by his supply cart and gave a slow, quiet nod. Lily stayed by Mac's side, gripping his arm, phone buzzing nonstop in her pocket from friends texting things like, "Your grandpa's a legend," and "We're watching this on TV right now." As they neared the main office, the principal stepped aside to let them through, not with a smile or a speech, just with the respectful silence of someone who realized they'd misjudged the weight of a man's footsteps. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere had transformed. Cameras still rolled. The live broadcast hadn't stopped since the video first aired. And at the center of the long wooden table sat Colonel David Brenner, his eyes sharp but his voice softened with age. When Mac entered, the entire board stood, not out of protocol, but out of something deeper, realization. "Mr. McClellan," Brenner said, rising, "or should I say, Sergeant McClellan, would you please take a seat?" Mac hesitated. "I'm not looking to cause trouble." "You didn't," the superintendent replied. "You reminded us what we forgot. Please." Lily helped him to the chair at the head of the table. Cameras zoomed. Phones recorded. Comments poured into the live stream. Let him speak. Give him the floor. Finally, for a long moment, no one said anything. Just the quiet shuffle of chairs, the whir of a camcorder, the deep breath Mac took as he set down the folder, the same one that had been mocked not even 2 hours earlier. He looked at the board, then out at the small crowd that had gathered just beyond the open doors, students, teachers, parents. "I didn't come here for recognition," he said, voice steady. "I came here because my granddaughter asked me to." He nodded to Lily, whose eyes were glassy with pride. "I don't speak in public often. Haven't since '73. But I figured I'd share a few things. Thought maybe it'd matter." He opened the folder, slowly, gently. "This," he said, lifting the bronze star, "was for holding a position when we were outnumbered. Not because I was brave, but because I was last." The room was dead quiet. "This," he continued, holding up a faded photo of a unit, "is all that's left of most of them." He paused. "And this," he carefully unfolded the letter signed by Lieutenant General Rains, "this is the only thing I ever got that said, 'We saw what you did.'" The board members looked down. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. "I don't want medals," Max said. "I want kids to know what service means. Not just the uniforms and the gear in the movies, but the quiet stuff. The sacrifice no one claps for. That's what I came to talk about." He closed the folder. But I guess not everyone wanted to hear it. Colonel Brenner stood slowly. "They do now." Then he turned to the camera. "Let the record show. This board failed today. But this man did not." He gestured to the hallway. "We've invited Sergeant McClellan to return next week, not as a guest, but as our keynote speaker for a school-wide assembly. Mac blinked. That won't be necessary. It is, Brenna replied. For them. Students outside the room began clapping, unsure at first, but growing louder. A slow, rising wave of recognition that had nothing to do with fame and everything to do with finally seeing. Miss Collins, watching from home under temporary suspension, reportedly closed her laptop without a word. Within minutes, the clip of Mac's new speech hit social media and started trending under #SergeantSpeaks. In the days that followed, veterans from all over the country began sharing their own stories, some never told before, some long buried beneath years of silence and sarcasm. The district office received over 2,000 emails in support. A retired general from the Pentagon mailed a personal commendation. And Lily? She got asked to read the closing line of her grandpa's assembly address. But Mac didn't want a script. He didn't want a plaque. And when the school offered to dedicate the auditorium stage in his name, he respectfully declined. You want to honor veterans, he told the superintendent. Start by listening before laughing. He did agree to speak once more, and that day, every seat in the gym was filled. Students who barely looked up from their phones now sat straight. Teachers lined the walls. And when Mac stepped up to the podium in his simple shirt, VA jacket, and that same worn Marine cap, he didn't read from the folder. He just looked out over the crowd and said, "Thank you for hearing me this time." Then he stepped aside. And Lily, voice shaking, but proud, read the last line. You don't need rank to earn respect. You just need the courage to keep showing up. When it was over, kids lined up to shake his hand. A few asked to hear more stories. One boy simply said, "I'm going to tell my dad about you." Later that evening, back at home, Max sat on his porch with Lily beside him. The sun was setting. The sky was orange, and the world had finally felt quiet. Not forgotten. Just still. Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. You okay? Mac nodded. Yeah, I think I am. She smiled. You know, you kinda broke the internet today. He chuckled. Not bad for a tired old Marine. Huh? The next morning, a small plaque was quietly mounted just outside room 214. No ribbon cutting. No photos. Just 4 words, carved in clean brass. He spoke. We listened. And beneath it, in smaller letters, a new tradition for the school. Every Veterans Day, the first 10 minutes of every class will be silent. In honor of those who weren't. Harold McClellan never asked for recognition. He never raised his voice, never demanded apologies. But somehow, without ever needing to say the words, he taught an entire school and maybe a generation that silence, when held with dignity, can speak louder than any classroom ever could.